Well, as I say, we begin our series in the Psalms of Ascent, and I couldn't get this thought out of my mind when I started to prepare for these series of messages. And I've probably told you before that my wee granny was a shop steward in the factory. That height, but oh my goodness. And she used to organise these trips to Blackpool, you know, especially the September weekend. Anyone ever been to Blackpool on the September weekend? Oh, see, Donna. But anyway, that's where we used to go. And of course, when you're going all the way from the sunny heights of Irvine, all the way down to the deepest reaches of England, away down there in Blackpool, you have to have a wee song. And the song that was always started by somebody was the back of the bus. The canny sing, and the back, and then the front of the bus sing, the front of the bus, the canny sing. And so it would go. There were songs that you always knew were going to come out on that bus. Some of them that cannot be sung and repeated in church on a Sunday morning, but sing we did. And it did pass the boredom, the travelling songs. And as I said, these Psalms of Ascent were psalms for going up to Jerusalem. Psalm 120 through to Psalm 134. We won't necessarily look in detail at all of them on our journey through these Psalms, but we'll dip in. But they were for the three big holidays, you know, not just the September weekend, but for Passover, for the Feast of Weeks, and for the Feast of Booths. This was a major time when you would get your things together and you would go to Jerusalem, because there in Jerusalem was a temple of God, and there was the presence of God. That's where you would do your sacrifice. That's where you would do all the things that you had to do as a people of God. That would be a significant point in your year. And so as those times approached, you would get your bags packed, you would get on your feet, and you would make your way to Jerusalem for the big feast. Friends, I want to say to you that we are all in a very real way on a pilgrimage. We are on a long march to the New Jerusalem. We're still on our way to the New Jerusalem that God will bring out of heaven. When that time comes, we are going to worship Him in that place, in that city. We're going to stand with all the redeemed of God and praise His name for all that He has done. And we start to sing those pilgrim songs here and now. I know that if I asked you this morning, what is your favourite Christian song, your favourite worship song, your favourite hymn, you would have one that would spring to mind almost immediately. And shortly following that, you would be able to say, this is why this song means so much to me. Because back in 1914, this is what happened. Or when I was going through this was what was there. And the song imprints itself on your heart. And see, even in the context of a Sunday morning sometimes, when we sing a certain song, I don't know what's going on, but sometimes you can see a wee tear coming down the eve because you associate it with something. These songs that we've learned through our lives, they mean something on our journey, and so with these psalms. And the question that we're asking over these next few weeks, in essence, is how can we continue to sing the Lord's song in a land that is weary? You know, when there's no, how do we sing the Lord's song? How do we sing the songs of Zion, which spur us on to our eventual goal? We need a song. Now, these Psalms of Ascent are wide and varied and surprising, a little bit like today's. You know, if I was compiling a little list of cheery songs for the ascent to Jerusalem, if I was putting the album together, I don't know if I would have put number 121st. Because that's the first one that people sing. And you might be thinking, well, I don't know if I want to sing the rest of these if that's how cheerful the first one is. It's a curious psalm. It's a weird travelling song. It's not quite the joyful song that you expect to sing marching to Zion, because it is a song of distress. It's a song of crying out, Lord, look at what's happening. Look at what's happening. And so this is one of the songs that the people would sing on their way up to Jerusalem. And it's a strange thing. And it's a strange thing to be, if you wake up that particular morning cheerful on your way to Zion, and someone says, come on lads, let's strike up Psalm 120. You might think, oh, do we really have to? You know those songs that the pastor picks, do you think, oh, do we really have to sing that again? And it is one of those strange ones. It hardly seems like a fit. Sam Warren Wiersbe said, commenting on this psalm, it hardly seems like a fit hymn for a group of pilgrims to sing as they made their way to the sanctuary of God. It appears that the author of this psalm was in the same situation as the writer of Psalm 42. Circumstances prevented him from attending the feast, so he had to stay home among the people who made life difficult for him. The singing of this psalm would remind the pilgrims that they were indeed privileged to be able to go to Jerusalem, and that others would have liked to go with them. It's also a reminder to the travellers that when they returned home, they needed to carry some of the blessings to those who had stayed behind to help ease the burden. The psalm reminds believers today that worship is a privilege and the blessings we received must be shared. That's a helpful insight. You see, when we sing as God's people, we sing for ourselves, we sing to God, but sometimes we're singing for others. We're choosing with empathy to enter into the situations of others. And isn't there strength in that? Isn't there strength when you sense that there's somebody will get down into the dirt with you and sing the weary song alongside you? Can you think of situations when someone has just got into your life and they've sat with you in the dust? They might not be in the dust themselves. They might be happy as Larry. I would like to know who Larry is, by the way. Anyone know? The answer's on a postcard. Yeah, Larry. Larry the Lamb. Well, you learn something new every single day. Thank you for that. But when someone just gets into that situation with you, and so as you're making your pilgrimage towards Jerusalem, and you strike up Psalm 20, you might be full of the joys of spring, but you are identifying with the people who are not able to make that joyful song. You're entering into their pain and their suffering. And in doing that, you're interceding for them, because this is a cry of deliverance. This is a cry out to the Lord for deliverance. I think one of the most common prayers that is ever prayed is one word. Help. Have you ever prayed that one? Help. I mean, sometimes you can't even get the word out, but there's just that something that happens and it's help. Or a situation that you're in and you think, help. Have you ever felt that in the depth of your being? At the source of the psalmist's distress in this situation is quite particular, and it's quite clear in the psalm. It's the case where the lives of others are used against us. And let's face it, who of us have never been in that situation? And who of us have never felt the pain and the sharpness and the distress of that situation? But this psalmist here knows that the one place that he can absolutely go to with this sense of cry of distress is the Lord. We go to the one who is the truth. In the face of the lies, in the face of the slander, in the face of the trouble, we go to the one who is truth and who knows the beginning from the end. And as we go to that place, as we stand in the presence of the one who knows the truth and the beginning of the end, we start to see life and our situations not from our perspective or from their perspective, but we see it from God's perspective, and we find in many ways that we can stand firm and secure in his righteousness and his truth. And that enables us to stand up yet again, in a sense to hold our chin up, to hold our chest forward and say, I stand in God in spite of it all. That is what's happening here in this psalm. The psalmist is distressed by the lies that swirl around. There's something tense here. There's something that has happened. But the psalmist knows for sure that God has heard and that God will answer. And that, friends, is the source of the psalmist's confidence. And it can be the source of your confidence. to know that you can stand in the presence of him who is truth, who knows truth, and who speaks to you of what he is doing for you and in you. And so I want to say to you this morning that there is permission all the way through the Psalms to let it all out. I mean, have you ever read one of the Psalms and you thought, oh, that's a bit, you know, I don't know if that should be in the Bible, to be honest. I don't know if you can say that. But what these psalms are poems and songs in the presence of a God who is the one who will carry us through, the safe place where we can say, God, look at this, I don't know what to do with it. He is the one to whom we can go with any kind of trouble. Isn't that good to know? And often in the Psalms, not all of them, often in the Psalms, you see them begin with this sense of distress and anguish. And even just in the process of laying those things out before God, the resolve comes. Because all of a sudden you remember the God who is goodness and grace. They are such beautiful human experiences. The wonderful thing is, from verse 3 to 5, we see that there's this assurance that God is going to respond. God not only hears, he's not only the one that we can go to, but he is the one who will respond. And he will respond in a number of ways. He'll often respond and deal with the things that are going on in our own hearts. And perhaps he will deal with the situation that is going on there. Perhaps he will bring all this vengeance that the psalmist talks about. You know, when he's hoping that they'll be assuaged by all sorts of big sticks, you know. God, will you deal with it in that way? God, will you respond in that way? And whether this revenge or a vengeance will come physically from the hand of God, there is that assurance when we come into the presence of God and hear his truth. As we are bolstered, we know that God will deal with the lies of the situation. There's an old Jewish prayer which I quite like. Here's one to put in your pocket for another day. It says, God, would you turn the ankles of our enemies so that we might know them by their limping? I think that's quite a nice prayer. God, would you turn the ankles of our enemies that we might know them by their limping? And that prayer and many of the prayers that we find in the Psalms are very human experiences of running to God when things don't seem to be as they should be. The very act that the psalmist goes to God and is heard by God is in itself a wonderful thing. Have you ever experienced the beautiful privilege of simply being heard by somebody? Have you experienced that? When somebody has truly listened to what is on your heart. There's a wee song that appears in the Sacred Heart book, which is a kind of singing I like to do, and it's called The Grieved Soul. And it says this, come, my soul, and let us try for a little season, every burden to lay by, come and let us reason. What is this that casts thee down? Who are those that grieve thee? Speak, and let the worst be known. Speaking may relieve thee. That act of simply speaking out the situation, of coming to God and unburdening yourself. Now, we don't exactly run a confessional at Arran Baptist Church, but I hope that if there's ever a situation or a place where you just feel like you want a good rant, I hope that you always know that there are ears and a heart that will listen. And I even say, even if your grievance is against big old me, I'm happy to come and sit and listen to it, because there is such a healing in being able to unburden ourselves in that way, because in that presence there is the grace of God. And there is that resolve that comes, and the psalmist's experience is telling us this. Here he is, pouring out his heart to God. As we are pilgrims making our way to the New Jerusalem, we need to have our songs, and we need to know that it's okay to express the songs that will heal our hearts and unburden our souls. Now here's the rub. Are you ready for the rub? Because in the last bit of the psalm, you kind of hope that as you're going through, it's going to get better. Have you ever been in that? You hope it's going to get better. But the end of the psalm is just as miserable as the beginning, in spite of the fact that God has heard. Let me just read to you again, verse 5 to 7. Woe is me, who dwell in Meshech, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long I have lived among those who hate peace. I'm for peace, but when I speak, they're for war. There's that continual sense that it's still hard. I'm coming to you, God. I'm expressing my pain to you. And as I keep on walking, it's still difficult. It's still hard. Here's the thing. On our march to the New Jerusalem, we're not promised any bed of roses. Has anyone ever told you that the Christian life is a bed of roses? They're lying to you. They're lying to you. And you know that, don't you? They're lying to you. The psalmist is saying, look, here's my distress. And here's my continued distress. Even God, although I know that you have heard me and that you've responded to me, still I'm in the midst of it. And that in itself is a prayer of intercession. The psalmist confided in God, that God can heal them, he can cry, he can defend, but it doesn't always take the situation away. And don't you know that to be true? The things that you can go to God with, he doesn't always take the situations away. Remember Paul talking in the New Testament about this thorn in his flesh? We don't exactly know what that is, but in spite of all the grace of God, he still had that thing that was in his side that was troubling to him. And on our pilgrim journey, there will be things that will trouble you. Meshech and Kedar are many miles away from each other in geography. And he's actually unlikely to be in these places. He's not saying, I am literally in this place. But these are sort of proverbial valleys of the shadow of death. They're the Babylons. They are lost places. They're deserted places. In the desert place, when I'm found in a desert place, though I walk through the wilderness, blessed be your name. That's the kind of thing. Meshech, the son of Japheth, whose children may have become Scythians or Muscovites, they're barbarian, evil people. In other words, the psalmist is saying, Lord, I'm living amongst these people. The people who are causing my distress, I'm still amongst them. And Kedar, the tent dwellers, the Bedouins, who are sort of wandering in this strange existence. There's a sort of lostness, a sort of aimless wandering. And the psalmist is saying, this is where I am. I'm wandering lost amongst evil people. That's what he's saying. This is my context, God. This is the context of where I am. Those kind of things can make you tired and feel weary. And you can be found like the psalmist, just wanting a bit of peace. I'm all for peace, the psalmist says, but whenever I mention it, they're just for war and fighting. It's like Aaron moans and groans on the old Facebook. You know, if you've been there, you know exactly what it's like. You think, oh, let's have a bit of good news, and somebody always wants to moan about something, you know. And that is the situation. That's a human condition. And we can find ourselves overwhelmed. But we find that in Christ, there is a different way in which we are invited to live. We need to foster that sense of desiring to be in peace, even though we're surrounded by people who may not want it. In Romans, Paul says, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Isn't that such a strong statement? If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. It just sort of throws the onus of peace back to us. Those of us who can tap into the strength of God, even in the context of disharmony and disunity and all that sort of thing, as far as it depends on me, I can say, I will choose to live at peace with everyone. Friends, that is not easy, is it? It is not easy, but it is the pilgrim's choice. It is the disciples' choice as we make the long, obedient walk towards the New Jerusalem. We seek to live at peace with everyone as far as it depends on us. The good news this morning is that even though we're going to have to keep on going through it, God is on the pilgrim road. He's with us by his Holy Spirit. And we have the resources in us from him that will take us on the next leg of the journey. Friends, you'll have to take from that what you need to take from that this morning, because I know some of you will be experiencing that. I don't know where I'm going to go with this. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to resolve this. I don't know. It may well be that you'll walk among the tents and among the people for a long time, but the pilgrim God is with you. And when you get to the end of the journey, everything is resolved in his presence in the New Jerusalem. That is the source of our song and our walking with him. There's a lovely little song we're going to sing now, and it may well be that you want to try and make this your testimony this morning. And it's a song that says, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, you have taught me to say, it is well with my soul. On the pilgrim journey, it is well with my soul. A few moments of quiet, and then we'll sing together.